Okay, so I think now we are live. Hello, everyone. We are here for another release meeting from Avocado, actually the version 65. I am Kyle, the newer contributor for the project. I'm gonna share my screen so we can get into the Trello board and see what we will be releasing right now. Okay, so starting with what we accomplished for this release here in the done column, starting from the bottom, we have this bug fixed. We had a bug with encoding strings on Python 3 for VM image providers. And that was pretty simple one to fix. We just start to set the encoding for the VM image pages, the HTML VM images pages, and everything seems to work properly right now. It was already merged. Other task done was this one. Is actually a new intent or effort that we are trying to move, that is about minimize the use of external binaries in our libraries and use the proper files when it's when we can use properly. For example, we in this sprint made changes in two of our utils libraries. The first one is the Linux modules one, and the other is the process library. Starting from the Linux modules, we made a change to use the file proc modules instead of running the ls mod. So now instead of calling instead of calling ls mod binary, external binary, we open the proc modules files and file and get the info directly. And something similar was done in process library. Instead of calling ps binary, we started to open and get informations on, just a second.
On /proc.
Yes, here on /proc, and get information about the process there. Do you want to add something about that, Kleber?
So yeah, there is a minor detail about that, which is basically that instead of running processes, it's more efficient to just read the files when they have similar information. But the other aspect is that we are looking a bit further into enabling the parsing of the information to be detached from the source of the information, so that we can for instance, get memory information from a remote system and parse it the same way. So by not relying on external commands, it's one step towards that. So there is at least two aspects to that general mindset on those changes.
Yes, and that mindset that Kleber mentioned, we already having this on review of new pull requests, so we are keeping in mind this approach right now. Okay, so moving on done things in this sprint, there's a new library that we are adding in this release. It's the SSH library, and I think Kleber actually done that, and I think he can tell a little bit more about this new functionality.
Yeah, so basically interacting with remote systems. It's something that it's really part of a lot of the testing that we do and a lot of testing that a lot of people do. And we started looking at maybe yet another abstraction layer that could connect to remote systems and run interactive sessions and run commands and get command results out of them. But in the process, we decided to start in the simplest way possible, and the most commonly used protocol is definitely SSH to connect to remote systems. So instead of bringing an abstraction layer, we introduce a library by name, by the name of SSH, so that people can using their tests. They do not require any external library, even though we have some plugins that use libraries such as Paramico, Fabric, etc. We decided to just build a wrapper around SSH. So in theory, if your system has the requirements for Avocado, which is basically Python and a few other Python modules, and the SSH client binary, then you should be able to use this functionality. That was kind of a conscious design decision. So having said that, let me just show a quick example on the API that you should expect to be able to use. Again, it's done with a focus on simplicity. So this is just like one example of an interactive session. Basically, you import from Avocado, you choose. So you just do from Avocado, you choose import SSH, and then you create the context of a session. So with session, you pass the connection information, address and port, and then you pass username and a key-based authentication. And when this is done, you have a session established. A session means a master connection and a master process, an SSH process handling a master connection. And then for every subsequent command out of this session, we have an SSH process being executed that reuses the same connection. So we get to get things from this command that are more or less transparent from what people expect from other Avocado APIs. So this is actually a command result object. So you have access to exit status, you have access to the duration, standard out separated from standard error, and other like common things that you would expect out of process.run. So they feel, the session.command feels really similar to the process.run command because they're basically a simple wrapper around SSH client. So that's about it. And we have some users of that being proposed to some test suites such as QEMU.
Right. Thank you, Kleber. And I think we can move for the next part. If anyone has any question about things, you can interrupt us anytime. So the next one was an improvement around the also the process library from Avocado. We had a restriction or a bug that make not be possible to interrupt the process that was running, enabling sudo. So when you run a process calling with sudo equal true and passing a amount of timeouts, the process was not terminated after the timeout, or even with the function kill process tree, it was not possible to kill a pseudo process as well. So with this change, we made some improvements. Now we can get the get the owner ID of a process that was a consequence of the implementation. So now the uTools process library has a new function called get owner ID. So reading the proc file, we can get the ID of the owner of some process. And this function now is used internally in the process execution. So we can get the owner ID and run the kill command directly with sudo equal true also, passing sudo equal true also. So now it's possible to interrupt with timeout or kill process tree a sudo process. Moving on, we have two little refactoring that was just a moving of a bunch of tests that was implemented on Avocado core, but actually runs only if some plugins was enabled. One example is the HTML plugin. Now the tests are in plugin instead of Avocado core, and also some tests with remote plugin that also is in the plugin itself and not more in Avocado. Moving, we actually have passed for done a task that is actually is a one fix. This behavior is expected actually, this one we couldn't reproduce, was a bug opened for a while, since 8th May, and we couldn't reproduce anymore. Probably it's fixed, but we can open it again if it's needed. The only one passing for the next task, it was a task that was started on the last sprint and finished now. Now we have a lot of new checks that was run during the make check, a lot of new linked checks that was run. It was a bunch of pull requests that was enabling one by one, and now we can see here on Avocado, just a quick check on Avocado. Make file, and actually I think it's not here, is in check all. Here now we have a lot of linked enabled. So it's a huge list of checks. So keep in mind that your new PRs are now running with this check enabled. So it's more okay with the link and the rules of the code. But in this sprint, we still do not enable all of the checks. We are going to keep working on that on the next sprints to get a better number of checks. That's it. The next one is also one issue that was not actually changed or implemented anything. We follow the recommendation of the PEP documentation to keep the check W503 or 503 disabled. It is a recommendation of Python documentation, so we didn't change anything in this sprint. Another one, the last one, was a bug that was fixed by Kleber. Also, I don't know if Kleber, do you have anything to mention about that?
So yeah, so the per test sysinfo, which is usually disabled, it requires a change in configuration to be enabled. It did work properly when tests succeed at the post stage, so after the tests, but it was not being executed when tests failed. So it was just a matter of switching some code around, and now it's fixed. So even if your tests fail, we try to collect system information after the test, and this is especially useful because when tests fail, you may want to look at system information to understand why it failed.
Okay, cool. So I think we finished the done column. There's any comment about this tasks that was done?
So just a quick comment is that we have been receiving a lot of contributions from other community members, and not all of those changes are being tracked as cards because this is what we plan and we don't plan on what we receive. So there is a lot more activity that happened during this sprint so that people know that there are other changes that you may want to take a look at the full Git log change if you're really interested in every single change that happened on the sprint.
Sure. I didn't mention everything, but for example, in this first page of merged pull requests, there are a lot of things implemented, a lot of refactorings and code improvements, and also all the collaboration of other people that is out of Avocado core team is also here documented and will be including this new release of Avocado, of course.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for now we are going to pass for the work in progress column. That's the work in progress that will be keeping for the next release. Starting here from the bottom of column, we have this task of improvement of the tests in the VM image library. We already have some tests implemented for VM image, but we think there is still space for more tests in this library or in this module. So we will keep this task for at least the beginning of the new sprint, so we can add more tests and improve the tests being done on VM image. We also have, passing for the next card, we also have some functional tests checklist here. Actually, there are a lot of them that was implemented in this sprint, but there's still both of them missing. I think there is any comment about that?
I think Lukács may want to comment. Basically, he worked on this, and I reviewed it. It looked fine, but there's some issues in either one or two of the commits of the series that I merged, and we actually had to revert it. But I'm saying all that because most of the work is done. We just have to identify where the breakage is, work on that, and then reapply that. And then the functionality should be enabled for Python 3 pretty soon.
Yeah, by the way, the biggest problem right now is that Avocado uses arguments like the parse namespace argument as argument to those functions. And the biggest problem is that in case we modify that, we need to modify those arguments for a different parser, for different function. We need to deep copy it in order not to modify the original arguments. And the problem is that on Python 3, we can't really copy some of the elements. So we would have to like whitelist, filter them, etc., which we need to like decide how to tackle that. But hopefully it's coming because especially I need it. I need the Python 3 support, so I'll spend some time on it. I plan on spending some time on it.
Cool, nice. Thank you. And so moving for the next one, is also a bug related with.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same
Yeah.
issue.
The same.
Okay. So we can pass for the next one. That's kind of related with the first one that I mentioned here in work in progress, is the creation of open source provider on VM image. So I'm taking this task to improve the tests and also create this new provider. Some study was done in this sprint for me and for Kleber as well about how open source deals with versioning of the images. We now have a clear way to a clear path to take and to implement the provider. Probably we will done in the beginning of this sprint and be ready for the next version. But passing for the next one is an Avocado VT related task, attempt to attach logs on unintended stall failure. Any comments about that, Lukas?
Basically, there is a work in progress to demonstrate how it should work or could work with a new plugin type that could add another path for Avocado configuration. Yeah, it's pending on review currently.
So I do remember trying this a while back, and it was working for some platforms, but not for others. And then you sent a pull request to deal with configuration locations, right? Which is under review indeed.
Yeah, basically, or originally we just assumed, okay, let's have all config files here. I mean, besides of other stuff, like one like this is a fairly complex card. One of them is requirements, which means, okay, there are other requirements that are not listed in requirements txt. And besides of that, we discovered that if you install Avocado not by RPM, but as an Avocado package, we basically store the configuration in a given location. But that's not correct according to Python, because you can't really store outside of the package location. And that's the problem I'm tackling right now. And the way on doing it, like one of the ways to do it is basically to introduce a plugin type and another exec point where your plugins will have chance to say, okay, I'm this plugin and I want you to parse those additional several locations as config files before we even execute Avocado. So it's like, it's not really a standard Avocado plugin. It's sort of pre-standard plugin, but it uses the same way of execution. The difference is that this is actually executed before we parse the settings object.
Okay. So it's basically a package resources registry where plugins can say, look at those other locations for configuration. Makes sense.
Yes.
I
And when we
started.
have this, we can actually modify Avocado VT on like that and not relying on copying files outside of its scope.
Makes sense.
Nice. So just moving on, the next is the Avocado Utils archive thing. Do you wanna?
Yeah. So I just a quick feedback. Like I got a confirmation from the user that actually generated this request, and that it's still relevant. That was kind of frozen for a while, but I intend to pick it up again. So no updates at this time, but we may have an update shortly.
Okay, nice. And the next one is this task. This also is work in progress with a lot of PRs and reviews. That's default to recursive. Any comments related to that?
So I can give a brief comment. So this work was kind of really large work. We have already merged the majority of that. So I think about 8 commits have already been merged into 2 or 3 different stages. We are left basically with 2 commits with most of the pending functionality, and I have actually made a few comments on the pull request that Lucas has opened on V3. So that's my view of it, and I'm hoping that we'll get this done soon enough. Lukash, do you?
Yep, I mean, hopefully. I agree.
Okay.
Okay, nice. And the next one is this define and improve sources of test params.
Yeah, so we had, again, like we are acting a lot based on use case requirements. And one of the use case requirements that we see really often is the ability, like not the ability, but the need to pass parameters to test. Like even simple parameters, like we mentioned QEMU a lot because we are spending a lot of time with that. But like one really obvious question is, okay, so how do I run those tests and pass a different QEMU binary path? And that is the kind of answer that we cannot, to be honest, answer it so easily. People would have to use one of those varianter implementations at this point. And we are in search for a definitive solution. And the definitive solution should probably be similar to what is listed on the card. So a series of precedents, like a precedence order and a list of places where test parameters could be fetched from and applied during the execution of the test. But I felt that we should probably start with something simple, so I worked on a specific pull request that implements command line parameter support. So basically, people running Avocado run get the chance of passing a parameter key and value, so name and value, and that will ultimately be used on all tests. It's a mutually exclusive mechanism at this point with the varianter. So to keep things simple and sane and not have to deal with how the various variant plugins will actually interact with those options, it's either one or the other on that pull request. So yeah, I think Kyle already reviewed it, merged the refactor work that was necessary before that. So maybe we'll have that in that release if we don't find any breakages.
Yes, that's it. So I think we can move on the next one. And the next 2 ones is from Kleber. Is this kind of related, Kleber? I don't know.
No, so this is work on another project, which Avocado has a plugin that interacts with Pict. And this is kind of an old card and the one that doesn't have any update for this sprint, which is basically implementing support for setting the encoding on the files that are used by that plugin, by that tool actually. So it's C++. It's a tool written in C++. The original author added some logics for trying to detect the encoding of the files, but it doesn't work the same way across all platforms. And we have decided or talked about not trying to detect encoding, but just let the user specify. I played with it, but I have not submitted a final version yet.
Okay. And the last one, so here in the work in progress, is the on Avocado VT work. at the Avocado and other requirements?
I think this has to do with what Lukáš was saying before. We kind of probably mixed a few of the ideas, but this has to do with the configuration, location, and all that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's it for the work in progress, and we can move for the what we will keep in backlog and turn in the backlog for the new sprint. So the first one is this task about the drop use of Pistache. That's a library that we use, but is not maintained anymore. Probably the project is dead, so we need to update the HTML plugin to use another library. We are still looking for this one and probably will be worked on the next sprint. The other one is the obsolete or the improvements for get CPU arch. There is some specific behaviors here that we need to clarify and improve. Probably writing a new function for get CPU informations that probably we will also work on the next sprint. Another one, the other ones is related with RPM builds, and also makes sense to keep in our backlog so we can work on the next sprint. And I don't know if you need to make some deep comments in any task, because we also we also have commented about them, almost all of them.
I think generally the sprint backlog is just something that we just like go briefly over. It's our expectation to work on those when in between tasks. To be honest about this sprint, as most of you know, this team works on Avocado, but also primarily providing Avocado as a framework to be used on for testing of the virtualization stack that is QEMU and libvirt. And we have been spending more and more time on QEMU itself. And so you can expect to see work on Avocado that is derivative from the work we're doing on QEMU. So that's why I'm saying, so that's why the sprint backlog on that board is short, and we are usually going to pick those tasks in addition to the work we're doing on QEMU.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's it for expectations. I don't know if you guys has other comments about that, but the expectation for the next sprint, this sprint especially that we're finishing today, the 65 version, took 4 weeks. So because we are trying to synchronize the work with the QEMU work as well, and also taking more features to release with the end of this sprint. So we took 4 weeks, but the expectation for the next one is 3 weeks cycle. Yes. So the next release probably will happens on 22 October.
Yeah, and this is let's just tell this again. We got a message on the mailing list on one of our community members asking if we were at a given conference or if anybody using Avocado was at a given conference. And I just want to make clear that on the week of the 22nd of October, we will be, all of us will be in Edinburgh for KVM Forum. And even if you're not on KVM Forum, there are a bunch of other events happening, usually happening alongside. So LinuxCon, a bunch of mobile events as well. So if you want to get in touch, want to talk to us, we'll be around there. Just let us know, and we will try to get together. And with the on the same subject yet, we do plan to keep with the 3-week release schedule, especially for this upcoming sprint, because we want to have a shiny new bright version for KVM forum.
Yes. So that's it for the work related with this sprint, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we can move for the updating
So you
mode.
should, yeah. So the way it's done, you archive release 64, like the second older release. You leave the current one.
Actually, I archived the 63, right?
Yeah, I think we should even.
63 and 64.
Yeah, I think we missed that on the.
Okay, so archiving 63 and 64.
Yeah, and then you create a new one, which is going to be Dawn 66.
Okay.
And the name will be.
I'm always bad at naming, but I'll just use the name of the thing that I'm watching right now. So
Avocado Sprint release.
yeah, in recursive mode, right? So actually, it could be one of two things. I'll actually use the second one, not the one that I thought about initially, but I think that's a good option. Let me.
I think there is a way to clone card, right?
So it's not something I'm watching, but it's something I'm reading. And there's also a movie, which I should be getting later this week. So it's going to be a movie as well. And
okay.
I'm going to...
Okay, so anything else? After the call, I can move properly the task of maintenance and things like that.
Yeah, so yeah, we are running the manual tests. So far, things are okay.
Yeah.
And we'll follow up with the test results on the mailing list, and then the release notes and the release announcement after that.
Right, I'm gonna stop sharing my thing. Okay. So that's it, guys. Thank you for Lukasz and Kleber for being in this meeting. As Kleber mentioned, we are still soon sending for the mailing list the results of manual tests and other information related. Yash was here too, so thank you, Yash. And so if no one has anything else to do, I think that's it.
I think we're done. Thank you so much, guys, and see you in Edinburgh.
Yes, see you in KVM forum.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.